was that people have $1 million ideas every day. They just
Mm.
maybe don't necessarily have the experience or the networking or the know-how to get it started or up off the ground, or maybe even the motivation. But there's so many times that people have these $1 million ideas that I think it's really valuable to write those down. And then, maybe later, 9 months later, when your friend texts you and says, "Hey, there's desks for sale," or whatever it might be, you can get those off the ground and get running. But I think there's a lot of value in not forgetting what some of your ideas are when you're motivated and inspired.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. You ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. We're always happy to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Jesse Yarger. And Jesse is a brief introduction, planned on being an English teacher, took a psychology class, loved it, switched in that direction, and then went to, or after doing or studies, went to work with kids and autism after graduating, and did that. Started a couple clinics for kids with autism, and was working with one time with a client, and had an idea, and I won't take still too much of his thunder, but had an idea, joking around, said, "Oh, that it's not really a joke. It's not a bad idea." Thought about it for a while and decided to circle back to it and actually build a business around it and get it going. So you'll get a bit more details from Jesse, but it's a fun journey to tell. And with that much as introduction, welcome on the podcast, Jesse.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So I gave kind of the real brief run through kind of a bit of your journey, but maybe take us back a bit in time to originally envisioning yourself as an English teacher, how your journey, and then how your journey went from there.
Yeah, so I wasn't always the smartest kid in school, and I usually got pretty good grades on reading and writing assignments, and that was pretty much it. So I kind of pigeonholed myself into that kind of field and profession, and I really grew to love it. Right before I graduated high school, though, I took a psychology course, and it kind of changed everything for me. And I decided to kind of pursue something in the human services field, rather than my plan to be an educator.
So you take the psychology course and kind of directs you in a new direction, which I think it sounds like it makes sense. Follow, find the thing that you love, and then find who will pay for it. And I think that's the best mixture of it. So you went into psychology. Now, how did you? And then you got the degree, you graduated. Now, how did you kind of get into working with kids with autism after you graduated?
Yeah, so I moved out to California for a year, and just kind of did some stuff out there. I got away from where I went to high school, and needed a job. Went to a job fair, and the first place that called me back was an organization that provided in-home services for kids with autism. Fast forward a little bit, I moved back to Utah, got some more experience, and really kind of fell in love with that work and that population, and decided to continue my education and get my master's degree in behavior analysis, and really set myself up to be able to work with a diverse group of people, but primarily kids who have autism and related disorders.
So now you get into that, and did the job search, find, hey, this is one that's an opening. I think it sounds interesting. You did that, and then it sounds like you again found a bit of passion because you stayed with it. You opened up a couple clinics or whatever you'd want to call them, to help kids with autism. And so it sounds like that was and it still is a bit the direction where your path or your journey has continued to head.
Yeah, I love it. I think I'm kind of at the point in my career where I really enjoy mentoring people who want to do what I've done in the past, and hopefully do it better, and learn from some of the mistakes that I've made. So I'm kind of at the point where I want to expand on that, and I think that's kind of where the idea for some of these desks um, came in, as well. So we can kind of provide other supports, or additional supports to the population that I've grown to enjoy working with so much.
So now you just touched on it, and that kind of dovetails into what you're doing with business today. But tell us kind of how that idea came about, what and what you're doing at the time that arose or kind of spurred that idea that now is evolved into an actual business.
Yeah, so my business partner, I will say, her name's Rebecca, and she's completely type A. So we work together with a couple kids actually, and we're working with one, and the mom just happened to be really nervous about sending him to school for the first time. He was about to come up on his kindergarten year, and he had this toy that he really enjoyed working with and playing with, and we used it as a motivator for him and a lot of different things. And we kind of joked around like, oh, if he could just take this toy to school with him, everything would be fine, and he would be, really successful and all that. And so that kind of got the wheels turning a little bit. And Rebecca and I, joked around, thought a little bit about, creating this desk. That just had sensory stimuli on it. So things that are, visually appealing, while still being minimally distracting,
Hmm.
and also things that are, tactilely pleasing, especially for kids with those sensory needs, like so many kids with autism have.
So now you have that idea and you do it, you kind of, and I always love it because I've been the same way. You have an idea, like, that's kind of a stupid idea, or that's never going to work. Then you start thinking, such a bad idea, and you kind of go through that. And so you guys had the idea, said, okay, there's that, maybe there's something to it. But then I think you mentioned that you kind of either got busy or shelved it for a period of time and let it sit there and linger for a bit before circling back. Is that right?
We did, yeah. So man, it was probably 9 months later. Uh, Pretty much all of quarantine had come up, and there were so many kids who weren't even in school anymore, and they were doing online school. Uh, and then just randomly one day, Rebecca texted me and she said, she saw some really inexpensive desks online, that a local university was getting rid of, and she's like, "Hey, remember that time we had that idea?" And I was
Which
like, "Yeah,
idea? I've had so many. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's one of the consequences of being all over the place sometimes. But she sent me a picture, and I was like, oh yeah, that we should still do that. That sounds like a good idea. Let's just buy some, and see what happens. They're very inexpensive, and I've got a basement that's not even close to being done, so I just threw them all down there and let it sit for a little bit, and we completely destroyed one of them, trying to figure out how to most effectively create this desk. And after that, we were able to kind of figure out what the best way to kind of put it together was, and how we could use it, not only as a tool to get kids to sit down and be motivated to learn, but also to not be distracted, because we knew immediately that would be one of the biggest barriers that we ran into.
So you did that because and I think that makes sense in the sense that you want them to have something to fidget with, but it can't be that the whole class is now hearing them fidget with it or playing with it, and it distracts the whole class. And so I think that makes sense to kind of find that balance. And that's kind of I like the idea of oh, you remember this idea we had several months ago that we didn't do anything with. I found some desks that are really inexpensive that we can try this out. Let's do it. And it kind of reinvigorates the idea that you've had, that you kind of sit there and linger, but it also kind of points to the timing has to be right, the opportunity has to be right, and you kind of had to go through that exercise. So now you guys get the desk, you kind of play with them, you kind of get a prototype, you kind of see what works, what doesn't work, and you start to build that into a business. So help us, give us the audience an idea. Is that business launch? Can they go buy it? Is it still in the prototype stage? Have you had sales, or kind of where is it at now?
Yeah, so we have a website that's launched, and we are an official, started business. It was interesting. One of the things I think is so important is just knowing people, and through my experiences with the autism community, which is a very tight knit community and a very supportive community, I was able to, remember some of the contacts that I've made 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago, and reached out to them. And they actually have a grant system. So we applied for a grant, and we actually won that award, and we're able to be approved essentially to provide 20 desks to schools throughout Utah and support our special education classrooms. So we completed that grant, and now we are really just in the business of figuring out how to work with schools, work with parents, and other caregivers, and really make sure that we're providing these supports, these customized, uh, unique looking desks to motivate kids to learn and sit down instead of spending so much time and energy and resources trying to get like redirected back to a seat. So these kids who are oftentimes very energetic, a little hyperactive, can then be motivated to sit down and get some of those needs met while they're learning and going through instruction, so teachers can spend more of their time and energy educating rather than redirecting.
Oh, cool. So no, and I think that definitely, it's kind of it's fun to see how an idea starts to take shape from, hey, we had a crazy idea, we didn't do anything with it. Okay, we found some desks. Now we're going to start to build it. We build a website, and it's kind of fun to see that iteration and that growth, and hope that it continues to grow and build further out. So that kind of takes us a bit to where you're at today. Now, looking a bit into the future, the next 6 to 12 months, where do you see things headed? Where do how do you see things working out, and kind of what's the direction you guys are going?
Yeah, it's a great question. We have really ambitious goals to get at least 50 desks out by the end of this year. We're at that 20 mark right now. The other thing that's really important to me is figuring out and ensuring that these work. We want to make sure that they're effective, and we have some data. We want to get some more data, some more people who are willing to track how often kids attend, or how much they're on task during instruction time. The data that we have are really positive. For example, the first kid that we use this with, he went from 24% attending to like 98% attending, and staying in his seat and just learning that way. So we want to make sure that that's not just a one-off. We want to make sure that these we're getting good, reliable data to show that these actually can be effective teaching tools, or assistance to our educators as well. So I'd say those are really our big goals. Get more just evidence that these are effective,
Mm.
and get more of them out there.
Well, cool. That sounds like it. It is fun. I think that the best thing is, hey, proof is in the pudding. Let's get them out there. Let's show that they're effective, that they work, that people are going to want them, and that it is beneficial to the kids. With autism, that gives them that something to play. To play with, or to deal with as they're learning to aid them. So excited to see how things continue to go for you guys. Well, as we kind of wrap up your journey, we hear a little bit about kind of how you got to where you're at today and where you guys are headed. Um, always have two questions at the end of each podcast, so we'll go ahead and jump to those now. So the first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was your worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so I think the worst business decision that I made was just poor time management in general. It's really difficult to start a business while you're doing another business, or while you're have your full time job, and I think it was really hard to just stick to a schedule of spending 1 to maybe 3 hours a day developing these desks, whether it was our like intellectual development or the actual manufacturing development for these desks. So the worst business decision I think that I made was just delaying or not prioritizing spending the time on these desks, because it sounds so easy on paper, and it's very very fast, very very quick, and that's not the case at all. So it is
Mm,
now. It wasn't then. So I think that was definitely the worst business decision that I made. And as far as what I learned from it, scheduling. I think organization has always been a pretty strong suit for me, but I think um, that became even more needed as I learned to really like allocate time towards these projects.
no, definitely makes sense. So cool. Well, then now let's jump right to the second question, which is, if you're now talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, this is tough. I talked about networking. I can't stress the importance of that. I really feel like if you don't learn something from everybody you've talked to, then you've almost done yourself a disservice. So that's kind of like my like one A. My main I think point is going to be to compartmentalize. It can sound so stressful to just be like, oh, I'm gonna be a business owner now. Just gonna start a business, and it can be really overwhelming. But really, when you break it down and when you say like, I'm just gonna start my business, like I'm literally gonna go to a website. I've done this a million times before. I've gone to some sort of website. It takes like 30 minutes, depending on what you're offering and what state you're in. It might even cost less than $100. And let's be honest, you're going to spend 30 minutes scrolling through Instagram before you go to bed anyway, or you're going to spend, $100 on something stupid on Amazon. So just being able to break it down and just say like, all right, I'm just going to do this today. I'm just going to get this out of the way. And then I'll at least set myself up for success or for opportunities to further develop businesses, or whatever the business idea might be in the future. And I also, I know I'm going long on this. I have so many ideas, but I think the other thing that is really valuable that I heard on a podcast once was that people have $1 million ideas every day. They just
Mm.
maybe don't necessarily have the experience or the networking or the know-how to get it started or up off the ground, or maybe even the motivation. But there's so many times that people have these $1 million ideas that I think it's really valuable to write those down. And then, maybe later, 9 months later, when your friend texts you and says, hey, there's desks for sale or whatever it might be, you can get those off the ground and get running. But I think there's a lot of value in not forgetting what some of your ideas are when you're motivated and inspired.
Yeah, I love that, and I think that makes sense. I mean, the thing I would probably add to that is there's a lot of people that have $1 million ideas. The difference between it being a $1 million business versus $1 million idea is the execution. In other words, you can have a lot of ideas, but if you never actually execute, never build on it, never do anything with it, it will stay in idea stage and will never go anywhere. So I think that the thing I'd add to it is now once you have the idea, execute on it, try it out, figure it out, and make sure that it works. And if it doesn't work, then you learn a lot of lessons and you are able to take or get takeaways and take that to the next business. And if you do make it work, then it is certainly worthwhile. So I would say not just have the idea and get out and execute on it. So well, as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer or client, they want to buy a desk, they want to be an investor in your business, they want to be an employee and help out, they want to volunteer, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out and find out more?
Yeah, I so there's two ways. First of all, I'm into all of those. I love volunteers. I love best friends. The first way is our website. It's www.sensoryintegrationdesks.com. The second way is just through our email. It's just sensoryintegration@outlook.com. And the other thing, we have some products on our website that families can buy or that individuals can buy. But we also really stress the importance of, if schools want to reach out and they say, well, we want 20 desks, but we don't want to buy 20 desks. We can go in and repurpose existing desks as well, and we'll work with them on a reasonable quote as well, so we can go in and get those done over a weekend or something like that. But ultimately, we just want to get these out there, and we just want to help kids. And so anything we can do to customize or make it work or fit for a specific school or a district or a family, we want to hear from you. So we're always willing to work with people and just make sure that it's the best fit and increases educational opportunities for students all across the educational platform.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, connect up, find out more, and support and use a product if you have a kid in need that it would be beneficial to. Well, as we wrap up, thank you again for coming on the podcast. Now, for all of you that are listeners, love to, if you have a journey to tell, we'd love to share it. Just to apply to be on as a guest on the podcast, just go to inventiveguest.com. A couple more things as listeners, or two more things. One, make sure to click subscribe in your podcast player so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out. And two, leave us a review so other people can find out about all of our awesome episodes. Last but not least, if you ever need help with patents, trademarks, or anything else, feel free to go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat. Now we do have, just as a reminder, as before we wrap up, we also have the our bonus question. We'll talk a little bit about intellectual property, so stay tuned for that. Otherwise, as we wrap up, if you're not going to listen to the bonus question, don't have any or don't want to listen or learn about IP, thanks for listening, and appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Okay, so with that, now we get to go right. I dive right into the bonus question because it's one of my favorite things because it's kind of fun. I always get a chance to, I'm always the one in the driver's seat, get asked the questions, don't have to answer anything. But now we get to flip gears, flip the table, and I get a chance to talk a little about the thing that I love and passionate about, which is intellectual property. So with that, I'll turn it over to you to ask, what is your number one intellectual property question?
Yeah. So, man, number one question. I think the biggest question that both Rebecca and I have is, how do we prevent this, or how do we make this really ours? So right now, there's not a patent, there's not anything like that. So what's the best way to take the thing that we've built and make sure that, like a major company with a lot of resources that we don't have, just doesn't buy one for cheap and then replicate it over and over and then send us back to our other jobs.
No, and I think, and that is always a hard, because I mean, it's a fair answer. Startups and small businesses are always, I would say, at a bit of a disadvantage as opposed to a big business when it comes to intellectual property, because, and I think that's generally life in general. The people that have more time, money, and effort, especially money, are able to, take advantage of that and utilize that and leverage it to their advantage. And so, if you're a startup or a small business, a lot of times with having a great idea, a great product, you always worry, what if somebody else says, hey, this is a great idea, and now they come along and replicate it. So, part of that is intellectual property, part of it's not. And I'll touch on those just a bit. On the intellectual property side, what you need to do is figure out what's core to your business. What is the thing that makes you unique and differentiating, gives you that competitive advantage, and then see if it's protectable. And that can be, hey, if it's an invention, you guys, this is a physical desk, that can be anything from it's how you make the desk. What do you integrate in? Are those different, unique? Are they going to be something that is going to be patentable or protectable? And sometimes it is, and that's great. And sometimes it's not. The other thing you can think about is on the patent side is you can also go by what's a design patent. So now you're looking at, are you making a unique looking desk? And it has something that's kind of design wise, maybe not in utility and functionality unique or different, but it has a unique look and feel such that, hey, if it looks like this, we want to protect this. We put in a ton of time and thought and effort as to where should this be placed? What should it be? How should it look? What is that aesthetic nature to it? And all those. And so those are always a couple things to protect. And also sometimes you get to the end of it and you say, you know what, we don't really have anything that's patentable, but what we're going to do is build a really good reputation and brand. We're going to give a really good story. And, this is how we came. We work with kids with autism all the time. And, this is why we came up with this product. And this is why it resonates with us. And here's our mission and that. And you build that kind of that story and that following and that brand. And that can also be very valuable. And you can protect that with a trademark. So those are always, and so that's what you kind of the process you go through is what is essential or core to our business, what really makes us different, and then how do we protect it. Now, on the other kind of or side of your question, which is, okay, so let's say we figure all that out, we still have the question, or what ends if a big business comes along and says, yeah, that's a great idea, let's copy it all, or let's just make our own. How do you protect that? And a couple things. If you don't have any protection, if you're not able to say, hey, we don't have a brand or we haven't built it yet, don't have anything patentable, it's going to be, you need to be, first to market, you build it, and then you continue to innovate, keep ahead of the competition. Sometimes, bigger businesses, they have a lot of benefit, time, money, and resources, but they're also a lot more slow moving. It takes longer to make decisions, to iterate through products, to listen to customer feedback, to roll out new programs. And that can be a benefit to a small startup or small business, is to say, hey, we don't have the time, money, and resources, but we can pivot, we can adjust, we can listen, we can we can continue to innovate and keep ahead of them. The other thing is if you do have it, and let's say you went and got a patent or a trademark, and you were to secure it, doesn't mean that the big business may not just say, hey, we're going to spend them under the table. Even if we do infringe, we're just going to simply rip them off. Then, there's a few options. One of which I think is always a good one is, every business has a competitor. It doesn't, Samsung has Apple, or Apple has Samsung, Pepsi has Coke, Ford has Chevy. Any business you go through, they always have a competitor, and there's very seldom any business that doesn't have somebody that's a competitor. So a lot of times what you're saying is, okay, maybe this competitor comes, knocks us off, but we have this, or, valuable intellectual property. We're going to go to this other business, their direct competitor, say, hey, we've got a good following, we've got a good brand, we've got a good, patents and that to cover this. Now, would you guys like to acquire us, to license from us, or otherwise do it? And it gives that competitor that advantage where they can go and enforce it. They can utilize and leverage what you've done. And there are a few other ways that you can go about it as well. So I think that you got to kind of start to look at the landscape. What do we want to protect? How do we want to protect it? What's the business overlay? Can we protect it? And then what are our options if somebody is, if we need to enforce it or otherwise do that? So that's a much longer, or a much more summarized discussion to something that I could talk about for hours, but it's a great question, definitely one that's interesting. So with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up the podcast. Now, if you or anybody, any of the listeners that have any other questions about patents, trademarks, or anything else, and we didn't answer it on this number one question, feel free to go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with me to chat, and always happy to help. Otherwise, thanks again, Jesse, for coming on to the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I'm sure we'll be in touch.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
Thanks, you too.